Thank you so much, Kev, for coming on here and letting me interview you. Can you describe your experience in human resources and do you see anything that has changed today at all?
Oh God, from when I first started, everything. DEI initiatives. So basically, when I was first working, HR was more of an afterthought. So the president's administrative person also oversaw HR. And it was more just paperwork. Okay, do we have all the proper paperwork? And occasionally a disciplinary situation, like, all right, Srunu messed up. We have to, discipline her. Now it's much more strategic. It's, thinking about the future of the company. What skills do we need? How can we recruit? And, in corporate culture, when I was your age, we didn't know what that was. Like you just took a job, if that was a job you got, you just took it. When I talk to students now, they're looking for the right cultural fit. They'll, is this the right job for me? We didn't know about any of that when I was your age. We just, hey, I'm an accountant. Hey, they have a need for an accountant. You apply to get the job. It's good. Now it's a lot different. I'm finding that workers are more demanding. They want to know, like, hey, what's going on? We didn't think to ask our boss questions. If we did, they would have told us to be quiet and go back to work. There was no, hey, let's have transparency. It's totally different, and I've always said, that I think HR is the hottest job because everyone wants something different, even benefits. It was interesting when I first started teaching 7 years ago, and I asked my class, if you're going for your first job, what's important? And I joke, it was the Jerry Maguire movie. Show me the money. Show me the money. That was it, money. Now it's like, hey, work-life balance. And you actually mentioned benefits now. Like before, I'm like, benefits is important. You need health insurance. Never came up. It was just money, money, money. Now it's work-life balance. Can I grow in the company? So to me, it's so much better because and the class today the question came up in class. I went from being an entry-level accountant to being CFO of the bank. How'd you do it? You know what? I outworked everyone. I was there before you, I was there after you. I did whatever it took. And I got to be CFO, and that was great. And then I'm like, all right, I did it. Now what? It wasn't fulfilling anymore. I am a person, I need the hunt. And once the hunt was over, I'm like, all right, this is boring. Let's go do something else now. So it's trying to, how do you attract people? When I worked at the bank, Srunu, we were the smallest bank in the city. We just didn't have money. So we'd meet you and you come and be a teller and you're like, Kev, I can literally go across the street, literally across the street and make, $1.50 more an hour. Like, guys, nice meeting you, Srinu. You couldn't afford the people. So, it's so much more competitive and now work from home. You know, my generation struggles with that because we want to watch you, want to see what you're doing, and looking at it going, that's just silly. If Shrunu's doing her job, who cares? I laugh at some of my friends who really don't like it. I'm like, okay, so you would prefer the Shrunu be in your office surfing the internet versus being home surfing the internet watching Netflix. And then when work's done or work's done, she's gonna, do whatever during the other time. Why do you care? So it said much harder now than it ever was, my friend.
And you mentioned the fact that it's more strategic now. Do you think AI slash like the artificial intelligence ChatGPT plays a big role into HR today, or do you think it's decreasing the value of HR? What do you think?
I'm more of a gut person. That would drive the HR person crazy. I'm Srinu, you know me a little bit. I'm high maintenance. I'm hard to play with. I talk fast, I do everything fast. And when I was interviewing people, I was looking for someone that would fit in with me. It's like, okay, accounting, she has the basic accounting skills. Everyone I'm interviewing has the skills. For me, it really was, can this person keep up with me? Will this person like working with me? And, she's like, you can't just gut things. I'm like, well, that's how I operate. I'm like, there's people I met and I'm like, you just wouldn't click with me. So it wouldn't be fair to add you onto the team when I know that it's not going to work. And she's just be so frustrated by it. I'm like, it has to be the right fit. And then when I hired the person and they were the right fit. So random things, Srinu, when I get stressed, I go like this. So some days my hair's sticking up straight. So when you see me like that, you know I'm stressed. This woman would walk in my office, hey, Kev, that's okay. And she'd leave. I'm like, where are you going? I learned never to talk to you when your hair's sticking up straight because you're not listening. Because, I know that about you now. And it'd be cute. When that would happen, like earlier in the day, I'd leave my office, come back, there'd be a Mountain Dew on my desk. Like when she went out to lunch, she'd just bring me back. Like, I can tell you need an extra dew today. But she knew how to read me, and that's for me. That's who I want on my team. It's people like you. Like we've already talked about having you come on the e-board with us. Well, I'm asking you because I'm comfortable with you. I know you can do what I need you to do. It's that, like, well, why her over everyone else? Comfort level. I'm confident in their abilities. And sometimes that doesn't show up on resumes. Like, well, on paper, this person would be the right choice. Nah, but paper is paper. It's God. And nowadays you have to be careful because like, well, just I have to defend why I made this decision. And you can't be Srinu, I interviewed a woman years ago, back in the day when you sent in your resumes, because she used purple paper on the resume and I like purple. Like what? I'm like, oh, purple. Now I could have been like, I hate purple. And the HR person would just cringe. She's like, I just have this weird gift. I can just look at resumes without really reading them too much. And I'm like, this person, I want to meet this person. Why? Just just feel like I want to meet this person. And often that would be the right person. And she's like, I just can't stand how you just make stuff up, like it's no rhyme or reason. You can't just look at a resume, the name going, just, I don't know. I feel like that's the one. And she's like, well, can you read through the whole resume? I'm like, I don't have to. I have a good feeling about this person. And often I'd be the person. And she would just, bang her head off the desk because, they want to interview everyone, and I don't want to do that. One of the things that I did when I was leaving the bank at the end, we stopped interviewing new people. If we needed someone and you were a teller, I'm like, Srunu, we need a new teller. Go get me one of your friends. And now it worked because you would recommend good people because, my joke is good people hang out with other good people. Very rare that someone who's a really good person has crappy friends. Very rare. So I'm like, all right. And I would tease you, Shrino, if I hire your person and they stink, it's on you, dude. And I'm gonna remind you every day that you gave me this horrible person. But it eliminated that because to me it's so challenging. I meet you, I'm talking to you, you're laughing at my jokes, you dressed up and nice, you had all the right answers, and then I interview and hire you and realize you weren't the right person. You just knew how to interview well. And other people who don't interview well, I'm like, yeah, this is the person. So you definitely don't want to be playing in HR with your student. That's the bottom line because I got everything, and in today's world, that they probably wouldn't let me near HR because of that. You can't just make stuff up like I do.
You're scaring me, Kev. I'm like, I want to go into HR. You're really scaring me on like the life.
I'm not a fan of HR. I just think it's so hard. And if you're gonna do it, you have to be in a company where senior management supports HR because in life, we'd have two employees do the exact same thing and we'd want to respond differently. I'm
Right.
like, okay, it all starts with the policy. What does the policy say? Yeah, I know what the policy says, but we really like Srunu. We don't like Kev. Well, if you fire Kev and for doing the exact thing Srunu did 2 weeks ago and everyone knows Srunu did it, good luck on that one. That's leaving yourself open to a lawsuit and stuff. So what makes you want to go into HR?
Me?
Yeah, what makes you want to do that?
It's something I find very much like I think okay, when you make it sound it's so hard, but I enjoy the leadership, the teamwork that kind of is involved, and the way like recruitment and hiring, like I just like to either accept or veto, Like it's just
Yep.
like it seems pretty I know it does seem very much hard once I get into it, but as of now, like in my position right now, I'm like, well, why not give it a shot?
Well, because you're going to have people like me who want to override you. It's my department, my people. So, I'm gonna want to have a big say in it. And like I said, sometimes just like, okay, this person, should be the one hired, but I want to go with this person. And they're always making sure you have to be able to document this. You can't just be, I got a feeling, They're like, you gotta have documentation of why one person, so you don't come across with potential discrimination or even bias. Let's talk about that, Shrinu. So when I was at the bank, everyone in my department was a white woman, except for one person over 50. And, we talk about culture fit. So you go, you find another white woman over 50 because it fits together well. I hired a woman who was in her late 20s, early 30s. It was horrible. She was the age of the other lady's daughters, and she's talking about, her crazy weekend activities. And these women are freaking out. They're like, oh my God, like they're hoping their daughter's not doing what she's doing, unfortunately. And I had to pull her aside saying, you got to stop telling these people these stories. Just what'd you do? I just went out with friends. Do not give them detail because you're scaring them. And, we had a little bit of a culture clash. Once she learned to be quiet and talk about, you know what? Hey, just random thing. I made cookies this weekend, like things 50-year-old women would do. Oh, what type of cookies did you make? I'm like, talk about that stuff. Or, hey, you spend time with your family. Don't talk about the fact that, you went out Saturday night and got drunk and whatever you did, because it's scaring the heck out of them and stuff. So, it just, again, we use that, and that's where the bias comes in. Hey, I want to hire someone that's going to fit in with these other women instead of, eventually I could see what was happening, and I'm like, I want younger people because all these people around the same age, at some point in time, they're all going to get ready to retire at the same time and wipe out my whole department. Where they're all, 55 at the same time, like, hey, we get to 60, well, I want to go. Then I'm like, oh crap, I got nobody in my department. So that's where we started looking at younger people and stuff. So, but again, we work differently. That young woman, she was amazing. The problem is she'd be done like her work in like 4 hours instead of eight, and I'm like, all right, you did good, but now you can't wander around the bank chatting with people because you have nothing to do because now the boss is yelling at me, go and give her something to do. So just like, if you're done, just kind of stay back here or don't go wandering out and stand in front of the president's office talking to his admin person because I'm getting yelled at for this. But that upset them. Like, well, she's working so much faster than us. Kev's going to notice that she's quote unquote a better employee than we are. So all these things play into the dynamics and stuff. So again, keep looking at marketing as something else, Rune. Okay, chuckle, chuckle. Uh,
Yeah, and we were talking about interviewing, looking at resumes and stuff. What challenge did you face, like within employee recruitment and retention?
Yeah, small bank, that's what killed us, Srunu. So if you were a teller who was talented working in a larger bank, you could become a customer service rep. In our bank, we really couldn't, Srunu. There's just no place to grow. And it killed us because, when quality person came in, you were like, what are you doing here? You could literally go across the street for a better opportunity and more money to start. So there was times, Srunu, trying to say as politically correct as possible, we had to hire people we wouldn't have hired. It's all right. Shrunu is the best that we can get, even though it's not even close to what we need. They wouldn't show up half the time. They would snap at customers. Like you're like, all right, who the hell hired this person? Like, well, this is our budget, and that's what you get for that budget. We can't afford to pay what other banks can pay. So, more of the high caliber people. So, and even when we got someone good, I just, I just look at you and smile, go, yeah, I probably got Shruna for a year, maybe 18 months before she's going to be out and the other bank's going to meet her and see, how great she is. And they're just going to recruit her. Sadly, that happened a lot. And like, okay, well, I was good for a year at least. And now I got to go find another Shruna. And it would be hard. Even money, sometimes you'd have to pay a little bit more simply because of the economy. And if people figured that out, Shrunu, they would lose their mind. Like, oh, Shrunu just came in. I've been here 2 years. She makes 30 cents more an hour than I do. And it's like, okay, give her 30 cents. I mean, times 40 is $12. It's $10 after taxes, but it's the principle of the thing, and sometimes we would hire someone new who had experience. Well, Shrunu's been a cashier somewhere at least, she's worked with money, we would pay you a little bit more than someone who had no experience. And, that was a challenge, just, okay, trying to keep everyone happy. Because in Massachusetts, like your employer may threaten you, Srunu, if you talk about money, you're fired. That's illegal. You can't tell if you want to, I think you told me you work at Market Basket. If you want to go around Market Basket telling everyone how much you make, there's nothing they can do about that. And people will get mad over 5 cents. Like, wow, Shrunu makes 5 cents more than I do. It's like, okay, dude, you want to get mad and just take $5 out of your pocket and hand it to them. Go, okay, we're good for the next month. You're even and stuff. So money and opportunity is always going to be the issue in smaller companies. Some people like it. They want to just come in and do the same job forever. I had a number of people, and you know what? You do a good job of what you do. If that's what you want, Shrinu, you never want to be promoted. Super, just keep doing a good job for me and we're both happy. I don't have to worry about you. But you get people like yourself come in, you're like, I'm never going to be able to make this woman happy. She's going to want more than we can give her, and there's just no room to put her. So that's the biggest issue in small companies.
Thank you so much. I also have another question. Did you ever
Sure.
tailor any training programs for your workers when they were hired, and did you train them or did you incorporate any sort of training program?
So you picked up on another really big issue. Unfortunately, when we would go through, turmoil of people leaving quickly, it would be, the new teller training the other new teller. That would often, we tried to have the manager train a new teller using that example, but sometimes, the manager's got to be the manager. So, hey, Shrunu, you train her. And what would happen is, you'd only been there like 6 months. You really didn't know everything either. And if you didn't know something right, you were training the new person to also not know it right. And it would be the running joke, like, oh yeah, Shrunu trained you. You do it that way because that's how Shrunu does it. So that was one of the flaws. We didn't have that perfect training. Okay, everyone learns the exact same thing. And often it was kind of on the fly. All right, Shrinu, I'm doing this. Come over here and watch this. And you'd see it, and like they didn't document it well. I'm like, there should be, everything's documentation so that if this comes up again 6 months from now, Shrinu can just go to the notes and go, oh, yeah, yeah, I remember now. I did this. There should be screenshots. Hey, this is exactly how you do it. But, I just remember that going, I saw it one day and I'm like, I went to HR, I'm like, can somebody explain to me why the woman who's been here, 2 months is training the new person? And they're like, because he's been here the longest at 2 months. It's like, all right, that's just downright scary. Because again, you probably don't know everything. And now this person, and it's just not fair to either one of them to ask someone with 2 months or to let them train and go, well, why are you yelling at me? That's what Shrunu showed me to do. That's not fair either. So it's just like, but again, when you have that small company without having, that training office, if you will, like, all right, I'm going to just show you how to do everything. Or worse, they hand you the book the first day. Here's the handbook. Shouldn't read through this. Well, it's like 122 pages. Yeah, yeah. First day, just read through that. And they don't do anything with you. They just let you read it. And then, okay, we're going to show you a video on how to do stuff. Well, everyone learns differently. So you got to look, okay, is that the best way for Shrunu to learn? Or is she more of a hands-on, has to see it type of person? But yeah, small bank, we just didn't have the training programs in place. And the hot part is, even when we did, like nobody takes this stuff seriously. You're like, okay, we have to have training on this topic, security. And you're kind of, like pulling your phone out of your pocket, looking around while, the security person's up there telling you everything you need to know. And you're like, because we would do it at the end of the day. And the people have worked all day, and then I got to stay an extra hour and listen to Shrunu tell us about security that I don't really care about or I think I know the answer to, and it just, all right, talk fast, Shrunu, because we want to go home. So yes, small bank definitely training was an issue.
While being in a small bank, and
Yep.
training programs were a little bit tough back then, but you were still together as like a sort of quote unquote team. How did you ensure your team was motivated and engaged throughout their 8 hours of working, and especially during like challenging times when people kept leaving and coming? And
Yep.
want to talk to you about that?
I mean, a lot of it back then, unfortunately, was just supervision. It was like, okay, Srunu, this needs to be done. So it was more the manager telling you what to do than you. And we had some people just super ambitious. They knew what needed to be done and they just did it. So in some cases, it was that, especially at the end of the day, there's, certain things you have to do. So I found that they would usually find a way to work together because it was in their best interest to get to go home quicker. Where if someone was standing around, it's like, Srinu, do this so that, we can leave now instead of just having to stay here for an extra half hour. But most people would try to find a rhythm. But so switching banks, my mother-in-law was also a teller, and they would fight all the time because it wasn't my week to have to do the drive-through because the drive-through window can be busy. It was my they would fight over who did what, or hey. I'm working faster than Shrunu, so I'm waiting on more customers than Shrunu does, because it's if for a lot of people they just work at whatever pace they want to work because they don't care how many people they wait on. But it would be cute if a cute guy came in, everyone sped up a little bit. Like I want to wait on the cute guy. I would see that a lot too. It was just kind of funny. I'm like, oh, okay, this guy's there, and they're like, here's Shrunu, here's your money, get out of here. So I wanna talk to the cute guy and stuff. But again, it's just the whole process, Shrinu, of a teleline. You have five people working like 7 feet apart. You're going to get on each other's nerves, plain and simple. You have no space of your own. People are there. Everyone's trying to do their part. It just, some days, the personalities would get the better of us. And sometimes it was simply, okay, let's put Kevin Shrunu at Teller Station 1 and 5. We got to just separate them because, they're sitting next to each other, and, Kev's chirping all day. And Shrunu's like, will you just be quiet for 5 minutes? You talk nonstop all day, and I'm just tired of listening to you, so type of thing. But it's just trying to get that equitableness where everyone feels like they're contributing. So.
Thank you so much. And sorry for juggling around for different topics, but we could talk about ethics.
Yeah.
The big thing right now with AI coming in,
Yep.
taking over the whole world.
Yep.
How did you define when you were in the small bank
Yep.
company? How did they define ethical behavior in the workplace? Like, did you ever deal with any situations like where someone was behaving morally wrong?
Yep.
Like about that?
Well, the hard part, like, people who have ability to give loans, you got to make sure they're following the same policy for everyone. You know, we interviewed a gentleman years ago who didn't want to he was doing mortgage loans. I grew up in a sectional low. It's economically challenged. And in the interview with me and the president, he came right out and said he doesn't want to go into those types of neighborhoods to do loans. That's illegal under the Community Reinvestment Act. You have to give everyone who has the ability to loan. And we're at this fancy country club eating a hamburger, and I looked at the president. He looked at me. I'm like, "You want me?" I'm like, "Dude, you realize that's illegal, right?" And he's like, "I don't care. I don't do any of these little small mortgages. Totally legal." And in some cases, are you favoring one customer over another? So if you're going to buy a certificate of deposit, you can negotiate a little bit higher interest rate. Are you giving everyone, who asked the same interest rate? Now, in some cases, you look at their relationship. If someone has a loan with us or other relationships, they may get a higher loan. I mean, a higher rate in the CD. But if you're just, hey, I'm not going to help Shrunu because she's a young kid, and I'm going to help someone who's Shrunu's mom's age. You have to look at those types of ethics, and hey, are you calling in sick when you're not sick? I mean, you see now where people work from home, doing two jobs at once to make double the money. It's like, nah, Shrunu, I can't meet you today at 3 because I have another call, which is with my other company. You're seeing that and stuff, and and people are like, well, is that right or wrong? Feels wrong. But then you might argue, but Kev, if I can do two full-time jobs and keep both bosses happy, so it depends on what your ethics is. Like some people, when they saw that, like, that's wrong. And I'm like, well, it feels wrong, but if Shrinu is the best employee for me and she's getting her work done and she can find a way to work another job without it impacting me, and I get to keep Srunu on my team, and that was, I was like, okay, when we had good people, how do we keep them? For instance, my person I told you about, she had a situation where just family things, and she's like, I need to quit. I'm like, well, you can't. She's like, I believe I can. I'm like, no, you can't. I'm like, what is your issue? She's like, I can only work 4 days a week. I'm like, okay, pick them. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're super valuable to me. If I have to give you up 1 day a week or 5 days a week, that's a no-brainer every day. Sure enough, that made everyone in the company really, really mad at me. Like the other vice president's like, well, if you do that, what if someone in my department wants to do it? Well, that's your call. That's your department. She's valuable and whatever. And she's looking at me. It's like, you're gonna get beat for this, right? I'm like, I'm picking you every time. I'll take whatever beating I need to take as long as you're on my team. And she was just stunned. She's like, I can't believe that, I'm like, look, the role you play on my team. You know how valuable you are. There's no mystery here. I tell you that every day. So this is what we're going to do. The other vice presidents, what type of, I mean, deal with your own people. If one of them comes back and says, now she was only getting paid for 4 days, it was like she was getting her whole salary to work 4 days. If someone in your team wants to work well, I don't want them to, then you say no. Then that's all I can tell you. But you get things like that, and that's where, maybe ethics comes in. You got to think about, okay, whatever I do impacts everyone, every other department. If like a simple thing one day, we happen to have a disposable grill that cook like hot dogs and hamburgers. It was in my nephew's car. And I'm like, you know what? Hey, it's a really beautiful day today. Here's some money, go to the store, get some hot dogs and hamburgers. He loves working the grill. I'm like, work the grill, let's feed everyone in the bank today. Now it's three branches. Next day you get a call like, "What's up with the barbecue?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, the employees in this branch are mad. They didn't get free hot dogs and hamburgers." I'm like, "You know what? Drive down, grab the grill on the back of my nephew's car, and cook hot dogs and hamburgers. Go and buy some." But again, the simple thing. You're like, "Hey, I thought I was doing well. This beautiful day. Let's get everyone some hot dogs and hamburgers." And all I did was make the other branches mad. Not fair. We should get hot dogs and hamburgers. Okay, so again, you got to think about everything you do and how it impacts the other branches, the other people. And there's days when, I would think about myself, like, hey, what's best for me and my department? And sometimes I had to step back and say, well, if you do this, what type of bomb are you creating for everyone else? Still want to work in HR?
Uh, you know what? I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna keep my answer the same. I
Yeah.
think I learn something each day when I'm in the workplace. I think that's my sort of belief on.
All right, so let me be honest with you. I honestly think you would be good at HR because you're very systematic, and that's what you need.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in HR, sometimes we let our feelings get the better of us.
Yeah.
I've had that where, and again, in HR, you can't be everyone's friend either because employees get confused. If you're sitting and eating lunch with them and then the next day you're writing them up for something, you're like, but dude, we just had lunch together yesterday. I just went out to lunch together. And I would say that to the HR person, you got to be careful because when the time comes, and it will, where something will go wrong, and these are the people you're hanging out with, they'll be like, I thought Srunu was my friend, and now she's, I'm in there getting yelled at and stuff. So, but it's very systematic, and like you said, that, helping people make good decisions. And it's being neutral because sometimes these are our people, and either we're too close to them or, you know what, I just don't like that employee. And, you need someone to hold you accountable. Kev, you're overreacting because you just don't like that person. If Shrunu did it, who's your person, you would have been like, Shrunu, don't be stupid, okay? Don't do that again. But you don't like this person, like, let's get rid of them. So I think all kidding aside, as much as I've been teasing you the whole time, I think you would be good at HR because you're very systematic and you can step back and say, okay, this is what's right for the company. And sometimes the people, at the branch level, I had a really sweet woman working for me, and unfortunately, she couldn't balance her cash draw. We have a policy if you're over a short, over a certain amount, we fire you. And she was, had some, hey, look, if you get to this level, you're fired. And then she was short a couple $100, had to fire her.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, I can't believe you fired her because she was a sweet kid. Like, she was married to this dude. They had a baby. The dude really wasn't all that helpful. Like, there was lots of reasons to like and admire this woman. And, my team was really mad. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? That's the policy. I have to let her go. I can't give her a free pass and stuff. And then to make it worse, like she's just standing there, like cleaning out her area, like for like a half hour. I'm like, can you just put your stuff in a box and go? Because everyone's like emotional about it. I'm like, they're like, bye, hugging her. I'm like, just like trying to sit in my office and like not make eye contact with anyone. But you need people who have that ability to be neutral and say the policy is the policy. Whether we like Srunu, don't like Srunu, it doesn't matter. This is what the policy says. This is what we're doing.
And
That's a skill. A lot of people can't. They just get emotional about it. Like, yeah, but Shrunu's so cool. We love Shrunu. Yeah, I know, but it doesn't mean just because Shrunu doesn't work anymore doesn't mean you can't be friends with her. Be friends with her on your own time. So that can be challenging too. Just having someone who has the ability to be fair and also holding us accountable. Like Kev, this is one of those times when you're being Kev and you're overreacting to something and you're not seeing it the way you should. That's one of the things I did like about our HR person. When she needed to, she could smack me. It's like, I know you want me to smack you when you're being stupid, and this is one of those times you're being stupid. I just what if you were in a better mood or having a better day, you would see this. And most of the time I'd be like, yeah, you're right. That is the way we should handle that. And that would happen to me unfortunately at the bank. Well, a lot of times I would get dragged into HR things that weren't even relevant to me because I couldn't when I force myself to, I can sit back and go, hey, this is how we should handle this. And often, they go back and forth. I'm like, how about this? Yeah, yeah. And I would joke like, "I'm glad I could help you guys. Can I go be CFO again now that I'm done being HR person?" And they're like, "Get out, Cal." Because sometimes you just need to be able to step back and say, you know what? A lot of times, Shuna, it was just simply, what does the policy say?
yes.
You know, that's what it comes down to, and making sure that you have good policies you put and adjust them if you need to. Shruna, a lot of times at the bank, our policies came from other banks.
Right. Yes.
We just, hey, I don't have a policy on it. And then you read it and go, that has nothing to do with our bank. Or we forget to cross out Lowell 5 and put in Washington Savings Bank on this search and replace. And the auditors would be like, Kev, just a nice policy from Lowell 5. Make sure you take out Lowell 5, okay? Like you missed Lowell 5 like 3 times in this policy. So that would happen a lot and stuff. But all kidding aside, you would be good at HR and stuff. So
Yeah, you just answered one of my questions. I was like, what do you believe are the most important qualities for someone in HR? And you just answered all.
neutrality every day. And also, let me add empathy. Empathy.
Yes.
Because that's what's hard, Trudy. Like, if you want to see me get really quiet, this is how you would make me really quiet. When I worked at the bank, we had a couple of moms who would miss days because their babies were sick. Now, in my head, I'm like, can't your man stay home every now and then with your baby? But if that happens, Shrunu, you would not hear me say a word. I don't have babies. I don't know what it's like to wake up to a sick baby. And they would tease me like, Kev, you don't have anything to say? I'm like, I don't. I don't. Like, we finally found a way to make Kev quiet. Just talk about babies. And because I don't know what that's like. And, other people get mad, like, Shrunu's missing too much time. Well, her baby's been legitimately sick. Like I told you many times, I had twin nephews who are 6. They went to daycare, now they're in kindergarten, and they get sick all the time because some kids, got some cold, brings it in, and they've both been sick off and on like the whole, winter so far. And their mom, has to miss days occasionally. The dad miss days because he's got to keep the kids home because you can't send them to school if they have a fever. The nurse will kick them right out and send them back to you. So I would just be like, okay, I don't know what that's like and stuff. So, but yeah, empathy, because there's times my issue with HR is a lot of times people just like to complain. Yeah, can you believe Srunu, she did this? You know what? Okay, Srunu did that. Can you go back to work now? But you have to have that ability to listen with empathy and say, you know what? Okay, I can see why Srunu would be upset with that, even though I'm not, but I can respect why. It's like being a professor. You have to have crazy empathy. And there's times when, like, hey, I didn't get this done because something silly happened. Well, we lost internet at my house for 22 minutes. Okay, so it came back on 22 minutes later, and that was at 4 in the afternoon, but you couldn't complete your assignment that day. No, no, because I was going to be watching Netflix at 4. It's like, oh yeah, there's times when you have to have that empathy, especially in HR. You have to actually care and listen to people. And not everyone has that empathy in life. Some people have none. And then, they're not going to learn it either. If you have no empathy, please don't go into HR because it's going to end badly for everyone. When you're like, what? That's what you have to bitch about, Srunu? That's your biggest problem, Srunu? Like, get out of my office. You're not going to be the HR person too long. So,
And to end off
yeah.
with hopefully a positive answer, what
Yeah.
was the most rewarding what was the most rewarding aspect of working in in HR?
Being right. When I gave someone a chance that, you would have voted against and being right. Or something. Okay, this is a positive one. I had a woman, Cambodian woman, and she was short $100, and she wanted to freaking quit on the spot because she was like embarrassed. She let me down, all this like grace type of thing. And I was just like, dude, no. And so I told her why I thought she was amazing, and she cried. Yeah, I'm like, let me tell you exactly what I think of you. And it's going to be good because you're already having a bad day. And she was like, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea that's how you felt about me. So it's when when that person's having that bad day and being able to back them up. That's that's what I like positively about HR is, so one of my expressions, Srunu, I would always say to my team, Srunu, do you want me to show you I love you or tell you I love you? And the answer is always both, both. But when have that issue, I'm like, remember how much I value you, Shrinu? We're gonna fix this for you because I value you. That's what I like about HR is having, someone would do something wrong in my office. Come on, Shrinu, take a breath. you know, there's not too much shit I can't fix, and you tell me and I can fix that. That's fine. So that's my favorite part of HR is having faith in people. Sometimes they don't have it in themselves or seeing someone's potential. I've seen yours since day one, since our class. That's HR to me. I've seen your potential. I know what you're going to accomplish, and sometimes when you tell that to people, they're like, this guy's just weird. Like, that's just weird. But, I do this for a living. I'm old. I've seen lots of people. I know who's going to go and who's like, this person's going to struggle. And some cases, you may just get mature overnight, and be fine. But I'm like, based on what I've seen, I think you might be in a little bit of trouble if you can't turn this around. So that's my favorite part of HR is just supporting people when they need to be supported because they make some crazy loyal to you. Then when something goes wrong and I need you to help me, you're going to be like, I remember when I went through this and you supported me. Yeah, I'm going to have you back now, boss. So how was that for closing on the positive?
It was very good. I liked it.